Hi, I'm Bob Jenkins, and during the course of this short film, I'm going to be talking to you about special educational needs and inclusion. I should be paying particular attention to those with more severe learning difficulties, the defectives, the handicapped, the educationally subnormal. No, don't switch off, please. This is only official terminology used by statutory bodies during my lifetime. Shocking, isn't it? I shall start by outlining the medical and social models of disability, which I shall be referring to in a short history of SEN provision. I'll then examine the current regulations and the proposed radical reforms of the system by our coalition government. Following on from this, I shall be looking at a debate that rages between those that believe in total inclusion and those that support our network of special schools. I'll be relating my experiences in the mainstream and special schools that I visited recently, and I shall conclude with a few thoughts of my own on this controversial subject. So what is meant by the medical model versus the social model of disability? This idea was constructed by Dr. Carol J. Gill at the Chicago Institute of Disability Research to explain how people with disabilities are seen by society. She suggests that using the medical model, disability is seen as a deficiency, a negative state which resides in the individual. The remedy is cure or normalisation of the individual, and the agent of remedy is the professional. This is a traditional model. More recently, we have seen the adoption of the social model, whereby disability is considered to be a difference. Being disabled is neutral. It derives from interaction between the individual and society and can be remedied by changes in this interaction which can be brought about by anyone engaged within it. So, let us now look at the history of SEN provision. In the first half of the 20th century, a strict interpretation of the medical model was used to identify those children who were considered defective. Medically diagnosed categories were utilised in order to pigeonhole children who were then given a basic education in special schools. With the introduction of the Education Act of 1944, the onus for provision of education was shifted to local education authorities, who were required to meet the needs of handicapped children within their remit by offering free education to all at primary and secondary levels. However, the medical model was still deployed, establishing 11 categories of handicap that required certain types of treatment. Integration into the mainstream was still quite limited. Classes of handicap were required to attend special schools specific to their particular medical needs. The 1960s and 70s saw a movement towards behavioural psychology in working with children with special needs. Protagonists of this approach rejected the medical model and strove to base their techniques on what they could observe. This then led to the possibility of modifying the challenges facing SEN children. There was a definite change in attitude towards special needs provision during this period. A combination of greater enlightenment, more widely available knowledge, and the employment of behaviourist methods meant that teachers based in mainstream schools were better equipped to deal with the demands of special needs pupils. Thus, a very small element of inclusion prevailed. In 1974, the government set up an inquiry to re-evaluate SEN provision in the UK. Chaired by Mary Warnock, now Baroness Warnock, the committee completed a lengthy investigation leading to the publication of the Warnock Report in 1978. Acting on the recommendations of this report, the government then passed the Education Act of 1981, which introduced many new measures relating to SEN provision. The most fundamental change in legislation was the introduction of the statementing process. The Warnock Report concluded that as many as 20% of children could be considered to be SEN. Only around 2% would need additional support beyond the capabilities of mainstream provision. The Education Act of 1993 further emphasised an inclusive approach by obliging schools to provide for children with special needs. They had to appoint SEN coordinators and publish specific policies. A 1997 Green Paper outlined government support for the UN's call for countries to adopt the principle of inclusive education. The Special Educational Needs and Disability Act of 2001 further strengthened the rights of disabled students. Baroness Waldock has since stated quite vehemently that the legislation introduced since the publication of the 1978 report has not reflected the true spirit of their findings, and thus should not be attributed to the conclusions of the committee. In a pamphlet published in 2005, she demanded a total rethink of SEN provision in the UK and an urgent review of the statement system. Let's now look at the current system that's in place. Children may be deemed to be SEN on the basis of a number of criteria. These can be behavioural, social, physical. They may manifest themselves in problems with reading and writing, understanding, concentrating, communicating. These are determined after first being referred to the SEN coordinator in a school or nursery, and then, if considered appropriate, undergoing an assessment of needs carried out by the local authority. The SEN coordinator can decide if a pupil can be classified as school action or early years action, needing extra support and different teaching methods, or school action or early action plus if help from external specialists is required. Where the needs are more severe, then a panel of experts and those involved in the education of the child can carry out an assessment resulting in the issuing of a statement of special educational needs. This lays down the specific needs of the child, how they should be met, and gives advice on which educational establishment should be attended. The parents then have the right to choose a school, either mainstream or special. The local authority must agree to honour this right subject to certain provision. The local authority must agree to honour this right subject to certain provisos, which are as follows. 1. The school must be suitable for the child's age, abilities, skills and needs. 2. It must meet certain academic criteria, which is an unlikely one to meet. 3. The child's presence will not have a detrimental effect on the education of other children at the school. And 4. It's deemed to be an effective use of local authority resources. Much of this is very open to interpretation, which can vary from region to region, resulting in accusations of postcoding, and a significant level of appeal activity exists. Figures from Ofsted show that in 2010 around 2.7% of all pupils had statements, whilst a further 18.2% were deemed to be classed as action or action plus. Last May, in the Queen's speech, the coalition government announced a radical reform of the SEN system. The then Children's Minister, Sarah Teifer, stated that the current system was not fit for purpose and new legislation would come into force in 2014. SEN statements and learning difficulty assessments for 16 to 25-year-olds will be replaced by single education, health and care plans, which will result in a far better coordination of support from the agencies involved. But whilst the changes affecting those with most severe difficulties have been widely welcomed, there have been many concerns expressed about pupils with milder learning difficulties who may lose out on the support they currently receive. The programme of reforms is also greatly hindered by a lack of evidence concerning costs. Edward Timpson, the new Children's Minister, who replaced Teifer in the summer reshuffle, recently announced that pilot schemes currently in force are being doubled in length in order to gain more information prior to implementation. And so we turn to the case for inclusion. Surely everybody wants a totally inclusive education system in this country. Following on from the World Conference in Special Education in 1994, resulting in the Salamanca Statement agreed by 92 governments and calling for inclusion across the board, and New Labour's subsequent plethora of radical reforms, then that would appear to be the current goal. However, what has resulted in mainstream education where SEN pupils have been placed is a state of locational inclusion, whereby the notion of all pupils being taught in one place is more important than the actual pedagogy deployed. This can still result in an element of segregation within the school community. It has become increasingly obvious in recent years that whilst there has been a drive towards inclusion in education, there has also developed a confusion as to the meaning of inclusion, a struggle to agree on definitions. Let's now consider the special schools. In order to put this sector into perspective, I should give you some statistics. Currently around 90,000 children attending around 1,000 special schools in England. This represents just 1.1% of the total school roll, which means that there are considerably more children with statements attending mainstream schools. They tend to attract those with more severe and multiple difficulties who may need more than just a different style of pedagogy in order to realise their potential. Carers and therapists are also required to be in constant attendance for some of these pupils. Mary Waldock uses the expression inclusion by choice, stating that not all children wish to be forced into mainstream education. She also believes that special schools offer a more productive and creative interpretation of the ideal of inclusive education for all. This sentiment was mirrored by the head teacher at a local school that I visited recently. She strongly believed that by bringing together children of very different backgrounds and with a wide range of learning difficulties and disabilities, that an inclusive community had been created that would offer a better level of education to all present. She also stated that if there was any way that full inclusion could ever be achieved offering fair and proper educational opportunities to her pupils within the mainstream, then she would welcome it. In conclusion, it would appear that with barely 1% of our children being taught outside the mainstream, we are already moving towards a state of inclusion in education. But let us not kid ourselves. It's becoming increasingly evident that not all of our children are being provided with quality teaching. A recent study carried out by the University of London highlights the problems being experienced by children with statements within the mainstream. Many have insufficient contact with their peers and a lower quality teaching experience. Often they spend more time with teaching assistants than with qualified teachers. In a period of financial constraint, it's hardly surprising that there is insufficient funding in place to retrain every teacher to provide quality pedagogy to all those placed before them, or to provide the environment and facilities needed. This sentiment was confirmed by the Vice Principal at a mainstream school that I visited, who stated that we had reached a plateau. There isn't the funding available to move to the next level. We cannot proceed towards our goal under our current education system. We are too bogged down with performance charts, league tables, accountability, budgets and exam results. Schools should be places of learning for children and adults, serving their communities. Teachers should be facilitators, maximising the potential of their pupils and encouraging autonomous learning. We need to bring about this total change in our approach to education before we can ever have a fully inclusive system serving all. Until then, we need our special schools to carry on with the work that they do. I'd like to thank Colleen Malone for her fantastic work behind the lens, enabling me to make this film. Good luck with your filmmaking course at university, Colleen. Cheers.